What happened to Italy when Rome fell? The textbooks tell us that in 476 AD, the Roman Empire was gone. The eternal city had collapsed, its emperors dethroned, its legions scattered. But history is never that simple. When the eagle banners disappeared, something strange rose in their place. A kingdom built by so-called barbarians, yet draped in Roman robes. A kingdom of warriors who dreamed not of destroying Rome, but of keeping it alive. This was the realm of the Ostrogoths, led by a king who carried a sword in one hand and Roman law in the other, a man who sought to rebuild Italy from the ashes of empire. Yet his vision would not last. Between faith and power, betrayal and war, this forgotten kingdom was torn apart, until all that remained were ruins, whispers, and questions. So, did the Ostrogoths save Rome's legacy, or bury it forever? This is their story. In a previous journey, we watched the Western Roman Empire collapse. We saw emperors reduced to pawns, soldiers unpaid, cities abandoned, and the eternal city humiliated by sack after sack. Rome's grandeur had fallen, but in Italy, the story did not end. In 476 AD, a boy emperor named Romulus Augustulus was deposed by a Germanic warlord, Odoacer. His throne was taken, his crown sent to Constantinople as a grim message. The West had no more emperors. But what did this mean for the people of Italy? For the farmers who still tilled their fields, the merchants who still opened their shops, the priests who still rang their church bells? Did life simply stop when the empire fell? The answer is stranger than we imagine. Italy did not vanish into chaos overnight. Instead, it became a land caught between worlds. Roman laws were still spoken in the courts, the Latin tongue still echoed in the streets. Senators in Rome still clung to their titles like actors performing on an empty stage. Yet the reality was darker. The great aqueducts crumbled without maintenance. Roads once trodden by legions became dangerous paths haunted by bandits. The once mighty Roman army was gone, replaced by mercenaries and warlords carving up what remained. At the center of this fragile new world stood Odoacer. He was not a Roman emperor, nor a barbarian king in the old sense. He was something in between, ruling Italy in the name of the Eastern Emperor, yet answering only to his sword. For a time, he gave Italy a fragile stability, but it was the stability of a cracked vase, one blow away from shattering. And in the shadows, another people watched. A Gothic people who had wandered for generations, hardened by war and exile. They saw in Italy not just a prize, but a destiny, and soon they would come to claim it. The fall of Rome was not the end. It was the beginning of a new and stranger chapter, the story of the Ostrogoths, and of their king who dared to rebuild what Rome had lost. While Odoacer ruled Italy with his fragile grip, far to the north a new power was stirring, the Ostrogoths. They were no strangers to Rome. For generations, these Gothic tribes had lived on the fringes of the empire, sometimes enemies, sometimes allies, always restless. They were wanderers forged in the crucible of war, hardened by hunger, migration, and broken promises. And among them rose a leader who would change Italy's fate, Theodoric. Born in 454 AD, Theodoric spent much of his youth not among his own people, but in Constantinople as a hostage of the Eastern Roman Empire. There, in the palaces of marble and gold, he learned to speak Latin, studied Roman law, and watched the games of emperors. He was both outsider and insider, Gothic by blood, Roman by education. When he returned to his people, he was no ordinary chief. He carried with him the vision of Rome and the iron discipline of its ways. Yet in battle, he was still every inch the Gothic warrior, fierce, commanding, a leader whose men would follow him into fire. By the late 480s, the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno faced a problem. Odoacer had grown too powerful in Italy, ruling in defiance of Constantinople. And so, Zeno turned to Theodoric. The deal was simple. Lead your Ostrogoths into Italy, defeat Odoacer, rule the land not as an emperor, but as Rome's ally. Theodoric accepted. For his people, weary of wandering, Italy was more than conquest. It was a homeland, the dream of a settled kingdom, built not on tents and camps, but on cities and stone. In 489 AD, the march began. Across the Alps poured the Ostrogothic hosts, led by their king on horseback, a man who carried two legacies, the sword of a barbarian and the laws of the Romans. For 3 years, Italy burned with war. Battles raged from the river Isonzo to Verona, from the Po Valley to the gates of Ravenna itself. Odoacer fought fiercely, but he was outmatched. Theodoric's discipline and vision outlasted him, and then came the fateful night of 493 AD. A peace was agreed, a banquet prepared. Odoacer and Theodoric sat together, sharing bread, sharing wine, and at the moment of supposed reconciliation, Theodoric struck. With a single blow, Odoacer was dead. Italy belonged to the Ostrogoths, and Theodoric, the child once raised in the halls of Constantinople, now wore the crown of a barbarian king who ruled as though he were Roman. When Theodoric seized Italy, he did not seek to erase Rome. He sought to wear its crown, and for a time, he succeeded. Unlike other conquerors, Theodoric did not burn the cities or discard their traditions. Instead, he preserved the Roman Senate, allowed its members to keep their privileges, and ruled with laws drawn straight from the imperial code. He called himself Rex, king, not emperor, but in his courts, Roman order lived on. For the common people, daily life often felt astonishingly familiar. Farmers still brought grain to market. Merchants still traded in the shadow of Roman forums. Latin remained the language of law and administration. To many Italians, it seemed as though Rome had not truly fallen, but had simply changed hands. Yet beneath the surface, the differences were profound. The Ostrogoths were warriors, few in number, but bound together by loyalty to their king. They lived apart from the Romans, settled on lands granted to them, their Gothic tongue still echoing in their camps. They followed Arian Christianity, a faith condemned as heresy by the Catholic majority. Two peoples, one kingdom, sharing a land, but not always a life. Religion was the sharpest divide. Theodoric, an Arian, ruled a population that looked to the Pope in Rome for spiritual authority. And yet, in one of the great paradoxes of his reign, he protected the Catholic Church. He forbade persecution, shielded bishops, and even ordered repairs to ancient churches and basilicas. In his mind, faith could differ, but the peace of the kingdom must endure. Architecture became the visible proof of this vision. In Ravenna, Theodoric's capital, he built monuments that still stand today. His palace, built in the Roman style, with mosaics that glimmered like the works of emperors past. His mausoleum, carved from a single block of stone, a Gothic tomb with Roman grandeur, and the church of Sant'Apollinare Nuovo, where mosaics gleam with golden light, rows of saints and processions that bear witness to the strange marriage of Gothic and Roman art. For a generation, Theodoric's Italy was something unique. Not the old empire, not yet the medieval world, but a fragile blend of both. A land where Gothic warriors stood guard while Roman senators debated in marble halls, where Arian kings bowed to Catholic popes, where new life flickered among ancient ruins. It was an illusion of stability, a careful balance on the edge of a blade. For while Theodoric dreamed of harmony, forces beyond his control were already gathering. In Constantinople, a new emperor watched Italy with hungry eyes. And when Theodoric was gone, the peace he forged would be tested by fire. For 3 decades, Theodoric held Italy in a fragile peace, but no kingdom built on the ruins of Rome could last forever. The end began in Constantinople. There, a new emperor sat the throne, Justinian. Brilliant, relentless, and obsessed with restoring Rome's lost glory. To him, the Ostrogothic kingdom was not a partner. It was a usurper, a shadow of empire squatting in Italy's rightful place. And so, he made his decision. The West must be retaken. When Theodoric died in 526, his dream of harmony died with him. His successors lacked his vision, and soon the kingdom splintered in rivalries and suspicion. Gothic generals turned on one another, Roman senators whispered of betrayal, and the once steady balance between Goth and Roman began to collapse. In 535, Justinian struck. His general Belisarius, the same man who had humbled the Vandals in Africa, sailed across the sea and set foot in Sicily. From there he marched north, a whirlwind of victories. Naples fell, Rome was taken, Ravenna itself surrendered. The Ostrogoths, stunned by the brilliance of one man, seemed on the brink of annihilation, but the Goths were not yet broken. They rallied behind a new leader, Totila, a warrior of fire and fury. For nearly 2 decades, Italy became a battlefield without end. Cities changed hands again and again. Rome was besieged, starved and battered until its streets ran with famine and death. Once proud monuments crumbled beneath the clash of swords and the hunger of desperate citizens. This was not a war of swift conquest. It was a war of exhaustion. Fields were burned, aqueducts shattered, towns emptied. Italy, once the heart of empire, was reduced to a wasteland. In the end, it was not heroism, but attrition that decided the struggle. Totila fell in battle, struck down as his army scattered. The last Gothic king, Teia, fought one final stand in 552, a desperate clash against Byzantine legions at the Battle of Mons Lactarius. Surrounded, his warriors fought to the last, their shields broken, their swords dull, until the Ostrogothic line was gone forever. The Gothic kingdom of Italy was no more. Justinian's dream of restoration had triumphed, but at a terrible cost. The land he had saved was a ruin, its cities hollow, its people starved, its fields abandoned. Italy was Roman once more, but Rome itself was a shadow. The Ostrogoths were gone, their kings slain, their armies scattered, their kingdom erased from the maps of emperors. And yet, not all vanished with them. Walk the streets of Ravenna and you can still find Theodoric. His mausoleum still stands, a fortress of stone carved for a Gothic king who dreamed of eternity. Step into the churches he built, and mosaics still shimmer with golden light, their colours as vivid as when his court once prayed beneath them. Here the Ostrogoths left their mark, not as conquerors, but as builders. In law and governance too their shadow lingered. Theodoric had ruled not as a barbarian chieftain, but as a Roman magistrate. His administration preserved the legal traditions of the empire, and for a generation the idea survived that even barbarians could carry Rome forward. But history has a cruel way of choosing what to remember. The Ostrogoths were Arians, condemned as heretics by the Catholic Church. Their chronicles were left unwritten, their stories untold. And so, while Rome's emperors filled books with their triumphs, the Ostrogoths faded into silence. Yet their kingdom mattered. It was a bridge between worlds, the last flicker of Rome before the darkness of the Middle Ages, the experiment of a people who tried to blend Gothic strength with Roman order. Their brief rule showed that the end of Rome was not one sudden collapse, but a long twilight filled with strange hybrids of old and new. To later generations they were forgotten, overshadowed by Byzantines, by Lombards, by Franks. But if we look closely, the Ostrogoths remind us of a truth that echoes through history, that even in defeat, even in erasure, a people can leave a legacy. In stone, in law, in memory. The Ostrogoths did not save Rome, they could not, but neither did they destroy it. Instead, they carried its embers for a brief, flickering moment, long enough for the world to pass from empire to medieval kingdom, from the old world to the new. And so, in the ruins of their forgotten kingdom, the question still lingers. Did the Ostrogoths fail, or did they give Rome one last breath of life? And so, the Ostrogoths pass into shadow. Their kingdom, once a beacon of hope, now little more than broken stone and scattered names in forgotten chronicles. Yet the question remains, did they save Rome's legacy, or did they bury it beneath the weight of their own failure? History will never give us a simple answer. Perhaps it is not meant to. Perhaps the true meaning of their story lies not in victory or defeat, but in the attempt itself, the struggle to keep alive what was already dying. I often wonder how we, too, will be remembered, not as victors or failures, but as flickers of light in an age of twilight. Like the Ostrogoths, we live knowing that all things fade, and yet we reach, still, for permanence. If this story has stirred something within you, I invite you to share your thoughts. Did the Ostrogoths preserve Rome, or hasten its end? Your reflections keep these forgotten voices alive, long after the dust has settled. And if you would walk with me further into the ruins of history, then remain with this channel, for there are many more echoes yet to follow. My time, like theirs, is never certain. But while my voice still endures, I will tell these tales, because some stories deserve to be remembered.